Good morning, this is Todd Hubbs, agricultural economist at the University of Illinois. Today I'm talking about my weekly outlook from January 28th, 2019. How many soybean acres do we need in 2019? I thought it might be useful to just run some scenarios about some possible use projections in the 1920 marketing year and what kind of ending stocks we might see from this current marketing year, and think about how many soybean acres will we need to maybe hit seasonal average farm price here in Illinois that would cover the cost of production under current projections provided by Gary Schnitke. We've seen some reports recently where soybean acreage has been pegged at around 86.7 million acres, down to about 84.7 million acres. I have it at about 85.7 million acres for 2019. And, under the current consumption scenarios we're seeing and the kind of ending stocks we're carrying out, that's probably more acres than we need to maybe cover the cost of production, depending on what your costs are. So I'm going to talk about this little scenario analysis I did in more detail here. What you're seeing here is some 2019 crop budgets from Central Illinois on high productivity farmland provided by Gary Schnitke. I use the soybeans after corn column, and as you can see, the total non-land costs are $363 per acre. I included a $260 land cost, which would bring the total cost per acre to about $623 an acre. At 63 bushels an acre, that puts the break-even price at $9.80 per bushel. I know that might seem high to some of you, and it is high for some of you, but I think this is a useful exercise to think about what your cost structure is and where your break-even price might be, and you can adjust accordingly based on your own cost. But overall, I think these budgets are fair, and we're looking at a $9.80. Based on the break-even price of $9.80 a bushel, I'm going to build a few scenarios, and there's a few things to point out in this slide that are important. One is I'm assuming a 7.1% stocks-to-use ratio, which would, last time we saw that number, put the national season average price in the mid-950s range. The last three marketing years, we've seen Illinois prices be about 27 cents above the national price. If that held for the 1920 marketing year, somewhere in the mid-950s would put us near break-even. We've seen that the current USDA forecast, which we're going to get an update on next week, has ending stocks at 955. It's widely expected that yield will fall a little bit. We may even lose a few acres. So I'm putting it at beginning stocks for 1920 or ending stocks for 1819, 929 million bushels. It could be lower than that. So when I think about the forecast for 1920 and how many acres do we need to hit that break-even price, I've built two scenarios: an optimistic scenario and then a more pessimistic scenario where we have flat use across the 1920 marketing year. So under both scenarios, I'm assuming my projection of 85.7 million acres and a yield of 49.2 bushels an acre. Now, we've been above that the last few years, but just to be on the safe side, we're thinking about 49.2. So under the optimistic scenario, we see a resolution of the trade deal, strong crush, strong exports, which puts consumption about 4.36 billion bushels. This is really optimistic in my opinion. And then that would put ending stocks at 767 million bushels, so a stocks use of about 17.6%. To reach 7.1% under these kind of consumption levels, we'd probably need around 76.3 million acres, as you can see at the bottom. Now, under the more flat use forecast, where we have basically no change between the marketing years with the 85.7 million acres, I end up with an ending stocks above a billion bushels, so we'd need acreage around 71 million acres to get down to the 7.1%. This seems dire. I do think an acreage around 82 million acres could see some prices in a range for break even briefly, but it'll come back to earth if we don't see the consumption pick up. Now, having said that, we could see consumption pick up. We've seen really strong crush through the first 4 months of this marketing year. Just will it continue into the second half as Argentina comes on? And will we see exports pick up? These are big questions and huge uncertainties in the soybean market right now. What I'm showing here is soybean planted and harvested acreage since the 1996-97 marketing year. I've got the projection for my acreage there at 85.7 million acres. If my scenarios are correct, we need to see acreage more in line with 2012, 2013 acreage than what we're currently projecting. Now, having said all this, it's not that dire per se. If we did see around 82 million acres, I think we would see some strong price reaction in the soybean market, but it really is getting dependent on what kind of consumption we're going to see. I always like a nice drought in South America. We're seeing weather issues down there, but we need China to come back into our market strong to get our consumption levels up, despite the strong crush we've seen recently. So while the scenario looks sort of dire, a low 80 million acreage planted acreage in soybeans would be really supportive of corn or soybean prices, of course. Or if we saw an uptick in consumption in the second half of this marketing year into the next marketing year. Thankfully, we've seen an end to the government shutdown, and we've got some reports to look forward to over the next couple of weeks, which will provide more clarity on some of these consumption numbers from USDA, and we can start thinking about how many acres we're going to plant. I'd like to thank you for your time. You can find my weekly outlook and daily analysis of issues related to Corn Belt farm economics at farm.daily.illinois.edu. I look forward to seeing you around the state of Illinois.